Okay, we're live.
Are we on?
I'll call this meeting to order. On Thursday, September 12th, 2024, we acknowledge that the sacred land on which Smith Falls is now located has been the site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation. We are grateful for the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we might meet here today. We are also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in the making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smith Falls. We are mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together may we care for this land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history of nation building through peace and friendship, being mindful of generations to come. I'm John Wanless, Chair of the PAC Committee. I'll now take attendance. Jay Brennan.
Here.
Steve Robinson.
Here.
Yvonne Robert.
Here.
Is Steve not online?
No, he's not participating.
Okay. Mary Remick.
Here.
Second item on agenda. Can I have a motion for the approval of the agenda? Moved by Jay, seconded by Stephen. All in favor? Carried. Adoptions of minutes. Planning Advisory Committee meeting August the 8th, 2024. Moved by Yvonne, seconded by Steve. All in favor? Carried. Disclosure of monetary interests. We'll now open the public meeting portion of the Planning Advisory Committee meeting to consider the application before us. Consent application B24-02 and minor variance application MV-24-04, both for 18 Elm Street, both of which have been filled by applicant MTM Construction and Property Management Ltd. Consent application B2402 proposes to sever the lot in half vertically to create two new lots. Minor variance application MV24-04 requests for relief from three parts of the Section 7, Table 7.2 multiple dwelling requirements of the town's zoning bylaw. The purpose and effect of these applications is to seek planning approvals to construct an 8-unit rental apartment dwelling at 18 Elm Street East that would be divided between two lots with 4 units on each lot. We will address the applications separately. First, we will consider the consent application. The minor variance application portion of the report will be presented after the decision for consent has been reached. This meeting is your opportunity to provide any feedback on these applications, and the Planning Advisory Committee welcomes any questions and comments you may have. The Planning Advisory Committee is the approval authority for both consent applications and minor variance applications. The committee will review these applications and consider comments from the public to inform their decisions on each application. I will now pass the meeting over to Planner 1 Richard Grant to report a notification and summary of consent application 24-02 18 Elm Street East. Following his presentation on the consent application, we will open the floor to the comments from the public. The applicants for their agent in attendance will also have an opportunity to address any concerns brought to the floor by the public. Richard.
Hi, thank you. All right. So here we'll have an introduction for both applications. In August 2024, the town received 2 concurrent applications for 18 Elm Street, consent application B2402 and minor variance application MV2404. The applicants propose to create an 8-unit residential dwelling at the subject property. Parking access will be provided on Oak Street and Elm Street East. 4 units per lot, so there will be 3 one-bedroom units and there will be one 2-bedroom unit. The existing residential dwelling has been demolished in preparation for the proposed development. For consent application B2402, they request to sever the subject property lengthwise, creating 2 new parcels measuring 150.44 feet or 45.85 meters in length. A quick summary of the minor variance application. For the minor variance applications, the applicants seek relief from several provisions of section 7.1.2, table 7.2, multiple dwelling requirements of the zoning bylaw, and they request a 11.43 minimum lot frontage, and they also request a 0-meter interior side yard, and they also request a density provision of one dwelling unit per 134.8 square meters of the lot area. Looking into the consent application, the key map here just shows that the lot will be divided vertically, where there'll be a through lot. There'll be 2 through lots created here. There will both be, one will be severed and one be retained. So to accommodate the construction of the multi-unit residential dwelling, the applicants are requesting to divide the lot at 18 Elm to create 2 new parcels. The retained and proposed will have a size of supposed to be 154 meters square feet with a length of 37.6 feet with a lot frontage on Elm East. Being a through lot, the west oriented lot will have a lot frontage of 37.6 feet or 11.46 meters on Oak Street, and the easterly lot will have a lot frontage of 12.34 meters on Elm Street because they're not exactly square. And what's included here is that both lots are 530 meters square. Here we can see a site sketch of the proposed development. You can see that the through lot will have a dividing line running through the lot, and on either side there will be 4 units. Here we can see the proposed elevations for Elm Street and Oak Street. So on the first image here we see Elm Street, and on the image on the right we see Oak Street. So both units will be facing each respective street. So here we can see the property survey outlined in red. We can see the subject property. And here for the site visit, we can see the existing conditions of the site where the former home has been demolished in preparation for the proposed development. Here we can see the subject property at Elm Street East from a Google Street view. So this is the street side from Elm Street East. And here we have the Oak Street view. So this is the other side of the property. And here's another view of the same street. So public feedback was received from the Public Works Department and the Chief Building Official, as well as from Leslie McGee, who is not present at this meeting, or not aware of. So the Chief Building Official did not have any objections to the proposal and has no further comments. And the Department of Public Works does not object to this proposal, but requests that as a condition of approval that they submit a site servicing report, which had already been submitted at the time of the presentation of the application. And public feedback will not be addressed for this portion. And so the comments received for public feedback will be addressed for the minor variance application portion. So in terms of the policy evaluation, we looked at LU 2.6, which speaks to intensification. We looked at section 4.5, which speaks to infrastructure, and section 6.3, which speaks to the residential portions, as well as the R2 zoning provisions in the comprehensive zoning bylaw, as well as the provincial policy statement, which kind of is the overarching policy statement. In looking at the review for the application, staff are of the opinion that the proposal is in conformity with the official plan and the zoning bylaw, as it does not propose a change to the residential land use, which is in conformity with our residential land use policies. And we are of the opinion that it conforms to the existing neighborhood context and represents an opportunity to intensify the existing property of the existing neighborhood. With 4 units per lot, the development proposes a form of intensification that supports additional housing units near Brockville Street, which is a main arterial road in Smith Falls. And looking at the adequacy for water and supply, we can say that there with access from Oak Street and Elm Street, each unit will have a designated parking stall, and staff assess that the proposed development demonstrates adequate vehicle access from the subject property. The proposed development has access to water and wastewater services from Elm Street East, fronting the front of the subject property, and only a water service connection is available on Oak Street between Jasper and Simpson Street. The Department of Public Works and Utilities has reviewed the provided serviceability report and does not object to the proposed severance. Going through here. As such, staff are of the opinion that the proposal broadly meets the intent of the official plan and is giving it favorable consideration by the committee. And here are the recommendations from. So as per typical process, an acceptable reference plan, and the owner shall provide 1 digital copy and 2 hard copies of the reference plan for the severed lot lands, as well as 1 digital and 2 hard copies of the deed and transfer document for the severed lands, and the balance of the outstanding taxes be paid.
Thanks, Richard. We'll begin by hearing from the applicants for any additional information or presentation that relates to the proposal to divide the lot. We will follow up with the opportunity for public to speak. All comments and questions need to be addressed through the chair. Please be advised that verbal comments from part of public record, and as such, we ask that you please state your name and address before providing verbal comment. Any members of the public who wish to speak to the application are asked to please approach the podium, one at a time. Can you quote your name and address, please?
Absolutely. My name is Blair Kerr. I live at 32 Jasper Avenue. Good evening or afternoon to the committee, to my lovely neighbors who I've gotten to know very well over the last week, and to the applicants. My mother and I, as I said, live at 32 Jasper Avenue. The back of our property abuts 18 Elm Street on the right side if you're looking from the front. On the left side if you're looking from Elm Street. My grandparents purchased our property and built our home 78 years ago. My mother has lived in this home for the most of her 66 years, and I for the most of my 30. For what it's worth, my mother's name is actually signed on the lot map, the deed map that was provided. Our backyard, like I said, abuts the left yard of 18 Elm Street. I'll start by saying that no one in our neighborhood is opposed to development. The buildings that were on that lot did need to be demolished. We are aware of that. We all understand that a new building will need to be constructed. After spending almost 20 hours in the past week reading and rereading the site plan, the servicing brief, the planning justification, the request to sever the lot, the request for variances, zoning maps, the zoning bylaws, portions of the Town of Smith Falls official plan, several sections of the Ontario Building Code, parts of the Ontario Health and Safety Act, parts of the Ontario Ministry of Transportation, Zoning and Land Use Policy, and the staff report, myself and my lovely neighbors are left with several questions and concerns.
Okay, we're dealing with the consent here, nothing to do with the minor variances, just the consent to split the property. That's what we're dealing with right now.
Well, our concerns address both matters, so would you like me to leave those till afterwards?
Yeah.
Respectfully?
That presentation's coming next.
Wonderful, thank you.
So what is this saying, proposing the severance? Is that it?
Anyone else have anything to?
We do oppose the severance.
Okay, is there any, is the agent here or that?
Are you the agent? Okay. Hi, my name is Tina Mackey. Oh, sorry. I am a co-owner, 50% share with my husband, Matt. We own MTM Construction and Property Management. We are also neighbors with the property. We live on Frost Street around the corner. I was born and raised in Smith Falls. I'm a teacher here, and we're well invested. Our kids go to school here. We love the town. As far as the consent application, we did want to divide the lot the other way, but there's no water services on the Oak Street side, which is why the severance is calling for down the other way, the long way. So when we bought the lot, it was advertised on Realtor that it could be severed, which is partly why we bought it, with that hope that we could, beautify Smith Falls. If you look at some of the projects we've done on our website, we do take a lot of care and consideration on our projects, but I'm not going to give a litany. It's just basically about this severance. So that's the only thing I really had to say about the severance. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Cheryl Brower. I live at 23 Elm Street East. About the severance, so we are concerned that, the bulk of our concerns are with the development of the building. You can't do that without the severance first. So we don't really know how to proceed if we don't actually give you our concerns about the fact that you're dividing the lot in half to basically create kind of a workaround for putting an apartment building on that lot. So those are our concerns. We don't really know how to address them in this forum, the way that this is structured. But we would like to say that we are not really willing to have an apartment building on that lot. And we feel that the plan, as outlined in the documents, looks and walks and talks like an apartment building.
I just wanted to highlight that, so the application for the severance does not bind us to the development concept. So while you may be opposed to the concept for the development, opposing the consent doesn't really mean the development.
Respectfully, we're opposed to both. Thank you.
No worries.
Is there anyone else who wants to speak about it? Okay, I'll move on.
Yeah, we're not clear. We're not. Do you need each of us to say that we oppose? Respectfully?
Everybody brings their hands who opposes. That's simple.
John?
Jay,
Yeah, so, it's two separate issues, but the application needs to proceed with the severance of a lot. So I guess my question, or wondering if the lot is severed, then, and what I'm hearing from the neighborhood is whatever condition, it should not be severed.
Correct.
Okay.
any other questions from the committee?
My question is mostly for the applicant at this point. Being the form of development proposed, my question is why sever? So I understand that, and whether or not you understand the risks of constructing once the property line's already established on the lot versus drawing the dividing lot line after the construction of the building.
Can you repeat that again, please?
Absolutely. So my first question is, given the form of development proposed, why sever? And secondly, as a developer, do you understand the risks taken with conducting the consent application to draw the property line before actually constructing the dividing wall on top?
Do I need to stand up and answer from here?
Yeah. You'll be on TV.
Matthew Mackey, 222 Frost Street. The property itself is certainly better suited to have 2 lots. It makes more sense for intensification, and we feel that that would be best use.
Sorry, just to my second question, are you aware of the risks involved with drawing that line before?
If the line gets drawn and you guys deny the plan as we've proposed it, then I guess we'll come up with a new plan.
And I wanted to say, sorry, quickly, when just from a realtor perspective and just as you're building, lots are expensive now. So, you know, and housing is a crisis. We, you know, even if we build 2 single family homes, yeah, I mean, that's a possibility too. But for that size of piece of land, it just made sense. And as it was advertised, it, you know, we felt that it was true because it fronts onto two streets, that it makes sense to offer more housing for people in our community, which is why we want to sever.
Yes, Mary.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to the planners, in the report, the consent evaluation speaks majorly to the development proposed, and in this case, we're looking at the land configuration itself. So I'm curious what the OP evaluation generally would state with respect to creating a second through lot on a block that essentially has none, and this would be the only through lot there. So are we keeping with the land use configuration in that area? If this is the only through lot, is there other through lots comparable within that area that would establish that
Context?
this is a compatible land pattern with the rest of the neighborhood?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. From what I can see from Elm Street, this would be the only through lot in that general area. So if your argument is to say that it's not compatible because if it's a through lot and every other lot is not a through lot, then what is your counter to that?
Sorry, repeat that, your question to me?
So I understand that this is the only through lot in Elm Street.
Yep.
So are you saying that because it's the only through lot, then it would have to be compatible to other through lots in the area?
Well, what I'm saying is that at the end of the report, there's an excerpt of the neighborhood area. And when I take a look at the majority of the lots in the area, what I'm seeing is they're rather corner lots or lots with only frontage on one street.
Right.
This, from my knowledge, would be one of few lots that are a through lot in the area. And I wonder if it's essentially compatible, in your opinion, to create a second through lot on the street when it's not a consistent land pattern in the area.
So you're
Is 6 Elm not a through lot?
technically yes. Technically yes. Would it not be consistent with the compatible of the area? Through you, Mr. Chair, I can understand if the through lot would create some form of incompatibility, but if you're looking at any potential development on that site, what possible alternative would you have in terms of developing? Would you just consider no consent and it just be through lot nonetheless?
Well, I think what I'm struggling with right now is that the consent on its own is one thing, right? So we could support the consent on its own, but I think what I'm struggling with here is that we're trying to draw a property line along a wall that hasn't been constructed yet.
So you're thinking that without it being constructed, it has no point to being divided?
I'm thinking that it may be very difficult for the developer to develop the dividing wall exactly on top of a lot line that is already drawn, and that it may be an easier possibility to revisit a consent after a building is constructed in order to ensure that that lot line is entirely on the shared building wall.
You, Mr. Chair, so your only concern is that the lot line won't be exactly as placed?
Well, what I'm more, in this case, because there's a development tied to it, yes.
Through you, Mr. Chair, so you think the best case is to develop it after the building has been developed?
Yes, I think I've made that clear, like in terms of, so if I think of the other processes that have been undertaken, typically you would look at, it becomes a difficult process having surveyors out to pin a foundation to ensure that a lot line goes directly under where they intend to build, and then you have to ensure that the construction is right on top.
That is a fairly common practice in building, in that footings are placed and then a surveyor comes and marks exactly where the things need to happen.
Okay.
We've talked with the planners about this, and we were under the impression that the process that we're taking here made most sense.
I'd also like to say one more thing too. You asked about why, so the 4 units each on both sides would allow for it to stay residential on both sides rather than develop some commercial big property. So if we kept the lot as is, then we're entitled to build a big apartment complex like you're not wanting. So if the lot stays as it is in one full lot, then that's probably the route we'll go, because we've now spent a lot of money on this lot. So with 4 units on both sides, all being 1 bedroom, it's leaning themselves to what we know as property managers in Smiths Falls, that there's a huge outcry for people over 50 on fixed incomes who don't have ground floor accommodation. So that was our, we manage a ton of properties in Smiths Falls. And that's the call we get every day. I'm over 50, I'm on a fixed income, I need ground floor. So we've got 2 ground floor 1 bedrooms, 2 ground floor 1 bedrooms, and a 1 bedroom and a 1 bedroom and 2 2 bedrooms. So this isn't going to increase a ton of traffic on the property. These are people like yourself who would enjoy, a nice outdoor space, quiet, no stairs. So it's not like a bunch of families, but we could certainly do that where you're getting a ton of families with kids, and if that's the sort of intensification that you're looking for, then that's going to increase the traffic immensely. So I guess, what's the alternative?
Hi, ma'am, I'm sorry, I didn't get your name the first time.
Oh, sorry, my name is Mary.
Mary, to the chair, to Mary. This is a new process for me, so forgive me. I can answer your first, after, again, spending about 20 hours or more reading several documentations in the last week, I can answer your reason as to why the applicants probably didn't request to sever, and that's on the current zoning. They can only build 1 4-unit building. However, if they requested to rezone, they would actually still need to request several variances based on current bylaws. Even if they wanted to even if they wanted to request rezoning to R4, they would still need to request several variances based on the current lot size. Thank you.
I don't have any other things.
Steve, you have anything to say?
No, everything that I thought of has been addressed.
You want, if you want?
I'm good, thank you.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, my name is the Reverend Dr. Thomas Brower, and I live at 23 Elm Street. And in partial response to the applicants, I would like to affirm that there is no ill will or desire to misrepresent. We are very aware of the housing crisis in Smiths Falls and are very...
Want it next to you? Is that the problem?
I'll finish my comment, please. We are very aware of the housing crisis in Smiths Falls. We are very aware of the need for new housing stock. The objections don't rest on whether or not a new building should be created. In addition, I would like to affirm the excellent workmanship that I've seen MTM carry out in the past. I would like to affirm their excellent management and you guys do good work. So there's little question about that. The detail of objections, or rather questions, will be better served, I think, in the second section. And the reason why there is objection at all being made in this section is because of our confusion, being uncertain how to express our questions that cover the whole project. And the separation of the two applications is creating some muddle in how we think to address this. So if there's any feeling on your side that this is that we're objecting to you, objecting to your desire to bring good housing to Smiths Falls, not at all. But as residents who are there, there are questions that we want to raise, and that's all. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The committee is tasked here with making a decision on the consent application. If the committee is ready to do so, I now entertain a motion to approve, not approve, or any other decision.
I'll move it.
Second.
Moved by Mary, second by, all in favor? Carried. I'll pass the meeting back to Richard Grant to the report on notification and summary of minor variance application MV-24-04, 18 Elm Street East. Following the presentation consent application, we will once again open the floor to comments from the public. The applicants and their agent attendants will open again, have an opportunity to address any concerns brought to the floor by the public. Richard?
Okay. So let us recap. So the applicants are proposing a frontage of 11.43 meters, an interior side yard of 0 meters, and a density of 1 dwelling per 134.8 square meters of lot area. In terms of feedback and comments, the Public Works Department does not object to this proposal and requires a servicing brief and a grading and drainage plan already be provided. And I should already note that that has already been provided as well. The servicing brief has already been provided as part of the application submission package. Additionally, Public Works has accepted the findings outlined in the study, having no concerns with the calculated theoretical sanitary discharge of the town's sanitary collection system from the proposed densification of the site. The theoretical sanitary discharge of 0.078 L/seconds is negligible and can be accommodated in the 250 millimeter 10-inch sanitary sewer fronting the property on Elm Street East. With respect to public feedback, Leslie McGee at 7 Simpson Street outlined several concerns about the proposed development with respect to sanitary service capacity, potential for increased traffic, and appropriate snow removal and garbage pickup and on-site waste management. As for the process for the minor variance, so before a test of the Planning Act that must be met for the committee to grant a minor variance. For the first test, does it conform to the general intent of the official plan? It is in staff's opinion that the proposed application meets the goal of official plan policy section residential 6.3. The residential density is 75.35 units per net hectare, which sits within the official plan's high density threshold of 50 to 142.8 units per net hectare as outlined in the residential density policy LU-2.9. There will be an increase in residential density for 75.35 units because the average density for the area is 36.6 units per net hectare. So, which exceeds the official plan's residential density threshold for a low to medium residential density in that area, which is technically 23.8 to 50 units per net hectare. The proposed application has a massing of a two-story residence with a pitched roof and sufficient space for a zoning compliant front yard and 1 parking stall per unit, and staff consider that compatible with the existing neighborhood. But please note that the residential density calculation did not consider Oak Street as it is not the front yard of the proposed development, and Oak Street informally functions as the rear end of several homes in that area. So if we're looking at the density calculation here, we can see 18 Elm. So the reason why it's considered 8 units, because at this point we're looking at it as one entire lot. And so we've calculated the density for the two sides of the street. So we have the left and the right hand side. So when you average those two numbers together, you get 36.6. Now the one in yellow is the only property on that street, which is a duplex that has a similar density, because the area of the property is 276.2, which is rather small. So that just means that there's a lot of, I guess, units on that small site, just so you can understand. I don't know if you can see this from here, but here I did a density map. So here just shows you the right side and the left side where the property is sitting, and the respective density for each of the homes. So the one in black, of course, is the subject property here, and all the others are homes along Elm Street. And so number 6, for example, has a very low density, though that being a through lot, because there's only one house there. And has a similar size in terms of square meter to the proposed development here. So all the other homes along here has similar densities for low to medium, considering the size of the lot and the number of units on that lot. Just for a bit of context here. All right, so looking at the ground floor assessment, units A and B are facing Elm Street East, and they will have a square footage of 1,245, or 115.66 meters squared, which includes the garage, and 564 square feet, or 52.32 meters for Unit B. So Unit A is the bigger unit, and Unit B is the smaller unit. Unit C and D would be stacked, and they're the ones that are facing Oak Street, and they were the 2 units, and they have an area of 532 square feet, or 49.42 meters in size. Through a gross floor assessment of the proposed development, the unit area of each bedroom is considered to be small in the opinion of staff, and further supports the position that despite higher residential density, the massing and scale are considered compatible with the existing neighborhood and is a desirable form of development. But we have recommended that there would be a 5-unit limit on the number of units on site, which is what it is right now, just so that it preserves the character of the neighborhood and manages the scale and visual impact from the street. Staff are of the opinion that it adheres as best as possible to the town's intent to preserve the character of the existing neighborhoods and closely conforms in terms of size and massing expressed in the intensification policy LU-2.6, despite having a relatively high residential density. And it is in our opinion that it conforms to infrastructure policy IN-4.5 after review from the Department of Public Works and Utilities, which reviewed the serviceability report for the proposed development. In staff's opinion, the proposed development represents a form of intensification that enhances the housing mix and the scale within the neighborhood. Moving on to test number 2, which is does it conform to the intent of the zoning bylaw. So the applicants requested 3 specific variances. The first one would be a lot frontage of 11.43 meters, where the zoning bylaw requires 18 meters. The proposed development maintains adequate vehicular access and sufficient egress from Elm Street East and Oak Street, given the semi-attached nature of the development when they're dividing the lot lengthwise. Staff are of the opinion that the requested relief of the reduced lot frontage still maintains the intent of the zoning bylaw by allowing adequate vehicular movement and pedestrian activity. Looking at variance request number 2 with a 0-meter interior side yard setback, the zoning bylaw requires a minimum aggregate for the interior side yard of 9 meters with at least 6.0 meters on one side. To realize the plans as proposed, the 8-unit dwelling will be divided vertically through the aforementioned consent application with the separating wall on the newly created lot line. There will be a 5.6 interior side yard difference sufficient for pedestrian mobility. So staff are of the opinion that the request here is rather technical in nature as it formalizes a zoning compliance issue that, if approved, functionally does not create any unforeseen impacts to the performance standards as is prescribed in Table 7.2. Looking at the third variance, so this is the density variance. So 1 dwelling unit per 134.8 square meters of the lot area whereas zoning bylaw requires one dwelling per 200 meters of lot area. The request to have a density of 134.8 square meters is a reduction of 32.6% in the required square footage per dwelling unit, would enable an additional unit per lot under the R2 requirements. In staff's opinion, the request to increase the number of units does not negatively exacerbate any additional concerns with respect to the available servicing capacity, existing traffic patterns, and garbage pickup. In the opinion of staff, the size of the units is considered small, which helps mitigate any potential impacts that would arise from the request to increase the number of units per lot. The Department of Public Works does not object to the application and has requested a stormwater management brief, a grading and drainage plan, and the incorporation of low-impact development techniques such as impermeable pavers and rain gardens. Essentially, low-impact development is designed to reduce the amount of stormwater runoff on site, so by making sure that it is as little as possible. Looking at test number 3, if it is desirable and appropriate, staff are of the opinion that this application presents an individual opportunity to create more housing in an established and relatively centrally located neighborhood, further enhancing the residential use of the subject property. The proposed development is not considered to cause additional traffic congestion on Elm Street. As it concerns snow removal, it will be addressed between the landowners at the development stage, and at present does not pose any unforeseen challenges to the site configuration and access. The determination of appropriateness was assessed on the merits of the proposed 8-unit residential dwelling scale and massing and the residential nature of the application. Staff are of the opinion that the relief requested through this application proposed a form of development that staff considered desirable and appropriate for the subject area. Looking at whether it is minor in impact in nature, the proposed reduction in lot frontage does not impede the functionality of the residential lot and still allows for adequate access to the public road. The reduction in the required interior side yard does not pose significant risk concerning the building separation distance and reduction in urban amenities such as sunlight and shadow, as the front yard setback of 6 meters reduces the visual presence posed by the 8-unit dwelling that would be an increased massing along Elm Street East. The 5.6 interior side yard on the other side provides a generous side yard in staff assessment that allows for an access to residents and back to the proposed development, reducing potential visual impacts from the street on both sides. Staff are of the opinion that the reduction in lot frontage and interior side yard is minor in nature and impact and does not pose any operational issues for residential use. Despite not conforming to policy LU 2.1, which is intensification, the massing and scale of the proposed development are compatible with the existing neighborhood, being 2 stories in height with adequate front yard setbacks and 1 parking stall per unit. Concerns about the proposed development's site servicing capacity have been found to be negligible by review from the Department of Public Works and Utilities, having confirmed that the site's sanitary discharge will have a minor impact on the town's sanitary collection system. Staff are of the opinion that the request for an increase in residential density does not overdevelop the site when considering the cumulative impact of the proposed massing of the 8-unit dwelling, reduced lot frontage, and interior side yards within the neighborhood. Planning staff are of the opinion that the proposal presents a reasonable construction of a proposed multi-unit dwelling and can be demonstrated to meet the 4 tests set up by the Planning Act. And here we are going through the recommendation. So the first recommendation is just permitting the requested relief as requested. The second one is really just having that requirement for a grading and drainage plan, a stormwater management brief, and the incorporation of LOD techniques. And the last set of recommendations are relating to the requirement for an as-built survey, number of bedroom limits, as well as the approval of the consent application as well, and the fact that this decision is valid for 2 years from the date of the decision is being issued. And now we're into that section.
Thanks, Richard. Following the presentation of consent application, we will once again open the floor to comments from the public. The applicants and their agents in attendance will once again have an opportunity to address any concerns brought to the floor by the public. We will begin hearing from the applicants on any additional information and presentation on the minor variance application. We will follow up with an opportunity to the public to speak. I remind anyone that all comments and questions need to be addressed through the chair.
Sorry, applicant first? Okay, well, I have some cute pictures on my phone. We do, Tegan, again, we do really take a lot of pride, and, you know, we're managing these properties, we're owning them. I guess one of the benefits is that because it's two properties, you know, if you do get a bad owner who's not doing well, you've got, you know, anyways, I'm not going to go into any negatives, but we feel that these are nice units that people need. There's an aging population. The new townhouses in Smiths Falls are providing a ton of housing that way for families. And so there's definitely, there's a need for affordable 3-bedroom units as well. But what we wanted to do was have something quiet in the neighborhood. You know, you've got the Lanark County housing kind of along Jasper Ave. So we recognize we live on Frost Street. Like I said, we live right with you. We're neighbors. So we wanted something quieter that, you know, wasn't going to be large. So it's 2-story. It's not preventing any sunlight from getting into anyone's house. It's the same that was there. And as far as hardscape, our designer and engineer evaluated that the hardscape that was there was actually a little bit more than the hardscape or building that we're proposing. So we think that, and as far as the look, it's going to look great. It's going to be, we want it to be accessible. I don't want to promise that, but like I said, accessible for walkers or for people like our parents who are aging and who need places that are ground floor that are like affordable. So we have Samir, we have Lapine, but there's a lot that aren't affordable. And I can promise you that these will be affordable. I don't know what else to say about it. We did look at the streetscape, and we did do garages on the Elm Street side to have that extra parking spot. So the 2 bedrooms there on the upstairs of those units, so that, you know, you wouldn't get any more than maybe a couple and 1 child, maybe 2, but again, that's a little much. And then on the back side on Oak, we recognize that that seems to be just there's not a lot of houses that front on that area. Terry Barker, we spoke to him, the neighbor on the other side. He was happy with what we were proposing. So the parking for the units that front on Oak would be there. And we want it to be comfortable and fitting. I'm just as much invested in this town as all of you. So that would be my plea there. And with that, I'll finish.
Mr. Chair, Thomas Brower once again. I assume you don't need my address again. 23 Elm Street, just in case. Thank you for that. Thank you for the presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for allowing us to be present for that. The application for variances have 3 sections. The first 2, I do not feel any level of education or competence to speak to their value. I'll leave that either to others or to yourself. The questions that I have, and again, questions, not objections. The questions that I have relate to the density proposal. And again, just to affirm, is this an appropriate time to raise those questions about the density element of the variance application?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, sir. So my questions are on the density element and the downstream impact of that increased density. So the town...
Go back to it if you like.
Okay, you spoke directly, sir, to parking or congestion on the street, that you didn't feel that it would have a significant impact. Well, one of my questions would be, is that actually the case, given how narrow Elm Street is at that point? So if our experience as residents is that if two vehicles are parked, one on either side of the street, which at present is legal, there is no through access for a third vehicle. Certainly not for any kind of delivery vehicle. So that is a question. Is there adequate space for guests, visitors of the people who will be living in that property? In addition to that, many of us in the neighborhood are parents, including ourselves, and we've got young kids who are excellent and responsible human beings and yet still play in traffic, whether we ask them to or not. And one of my concerns would be that an additional potentially 8 to more vehicles moving in and out of that property might increase risk to children at play in the neighborhood. So those are questions that I would raise there for density. And I think a question that continues, which is more on the logic of it and less on the downstream, a variance from 200 square meters to 134 square meters is a variance of about 35%, which seems like a massive variance. To an uneducated person in this field, that seems like a huge change, and that the density that is required for that variance, my question is, should that not be better considered an apartment building rather than two medium density houses? Like it sounds to an uneducated person like a very significant density change to the town plan. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Thomas. Is there anyone else?
I was just going to make a comment about, I'm not sure of the numbers, and I guess I wasn't prepared for this level of, members of the community. But what we're seeing in Ottawa and other communities are more dense intensification and dense lots. And typically people, from our experience with one bedrooms in town, one of the reasons they want to be in town is because they don't have a vehicle. So that is a big one, that they're within walking distance to all the amenities in town. Because there really isn't the parking. We've built other buildings in Smith Falls, and it is hard to find the parking. So we always like it when people don't have vehicles. But yeah, people may have vehicles, but there is one parking spot per unit, 2 for the 1 bedroom, or for the 2 bedroom, right? Because there's a garage parking as well. And I just find, in my experience, typically when you have 4 units, not everybody has a car, especially in town. So, but yeah, could the people down the road have a party or have guests over and somebody parks on the street? I guess that's always a thing about being in town. I mean, we live on the park, on Low Reach Park, and on soccer nights, whoa, there's no parking. Our kids are playing on our front yard, and there are cars everywhere. So I feel you. It's part of living in town. It's something we all, contend with on a regular basis. Thank you.
Do you want to speak? Yeah.
Thank you. Again, my name is Blair Kerr. I live at 32 Jasper Avenue. I will prepare the committee that I've drafted 17 questions total because, again, I spent more than 20 hours researching this. To the chair, or through the chair, to the town planners and MTM construction, I would ask a simple mathematical question. Is the number 134.8 closer to the number 130 or 200?
Closer to 130.
Correct. So, you know, I read all the town bylaws for zoning, and you know what density is actually 130 square 1 unit per 130 square meters? That of apartment buildings in R4. The request for variance for density reduction from the R2 zone maximum of 1 unit per 200 square meters down to 134.8 square meters, 1 unit, far more closely aligns with R4 zone apartment maximum density of 1 unit per 130 square meters. In other words, the proposed density is that of an apartment building as outlined in town bylaws, not a multiplex, and apartment buildings are simply not allowable in the R2 zone. MTM construction, in my opinion, in my neighbors' opinions, and based on simple math, should actually be requesting a rezoning if they want to build this development, although I will later lay out how even then they would need additional variances. Even if this is compared to a duplex with a property line running through the building, a duplex is still treated as one singular building. The difference is that it only has 2 units inside, which actually is allowable in this residential zone. As such, this 8-unit apartment building, again, we all know that's what it actually is, despite flip-flopping back and forth in every document I viewed, the 2 4-unit buildings, 1 8-unit building, is double the allowable maximum 4 units for this zone per building. Services will be feeding off the same streets or street, depending on the service, whether that's garbage, sewer, water, what have you, at the same points, again, whether it's labeled as 2 4-unit buildings, which actually is allowable, or 1 8-unit building, which is currently not allowable unless they requested a rezoning and then additional variances for this apartment building. That does not change the pressure it places on the neighborhood in terms of water, sewer, traffic, parking, garbage collection, snow removal, privacy, and noise. Further to that, on page 14 of the staff report, it is noted the existing residential densities on the street and explicitly states that this exceeds neighboring densities. The map was provided earlier by Mr. Grant, but on page 6 it notes that alternative densities are only appropriate if it matches 50% or more of developments on the block. Again, based on that map, it's actually more than every single one of in terms of density, every single one of the houses on that block. So the density that it would be is 75.1 unit per 75.35 net hectares. The average on the block is 36.6, 1 unit per 36.6 net hectares, and the development range is 23.8 to 50 net square hectares. And yet again, this proposed unit would actually, and again, based on the actual documentation, the actual bylaws, the actual official plan, this should actually only be approved if it matches 50% or more of the current densities. It exceeds all of them on this block. Further, given that most houses on the block are single-family homes or 2-unit duplexes, I know, because again, I live here to MTM Construction. I realize you call yourselves neighbors because you live about 10 blocks away. I wouldn't personally call that a neighbor, but that's a personal preference. There's simply no way that 50% of our neighbors have that or greater density, because almost everyone in our neighborhood, it's a single-family home, or it's a duplex with 1 single family living in it. And when I tallied the total number of residents on our block, so self-contained on the block with the street surrounding, this building would actually have more than all the occupants on our entire block. When I tallied the total number of residents, because again, I live there, I know, when I tallied the total number of residents on this half of Elm Street, that building would potentially have more than all of the occupants on that side of Elm Street just in one building. So what I would like to do is then continue to advocate that the change in density is in many ways being treated as a simple numerical reduction, but the following questions I will outline the fact that it impacts several aspects of service provision, infrastructure, and the quality of life in the neighborhood. So question 2, based on that, through the chair, I would like to ask the town planners and MTM Construction to clarify what exactly this building is being classified as. If it's being classified as 2 4-unit buildings, how is that actually being justified as opposed to an 8-unit apartment building, other than it has exterior entrances in each unit? The servicing brief notes that this building is both an apartment under the project section on page 1. Then in 3 spots, under the project section, the servicing section, the sanitary sections on pages 1 and 2, it notes it as a singular building. And then in other spots, it notes 2 4 semi-unit detached residential buildings. On page 2, page 10, page 14 of the staff report, the building is noted as the proposed 8-unit dwelling. In the opening of this session, actually, in the opening presentation, it went back and forth between an 8-unit building and both units on site. Again, like every single document, this flips back and forth between 2 4-unit buildings and 1 8-unit building. So what is this development actually going to be?
I believe through the consent application, this is going to be 2 4-unit buildings. Right?
Well, I don't know. The document flips back and forth several times.
The consent was just approved, right? So now the lot is severed, and now we're going to call it 2 4-unit buildings. The thing that I think we're missing here, Richard, is the density of 165 cars.
Pardon?
I think it would be handy to know the density of 165 cars.
Where is cars on
That's right here.
The lower right hand
Oh, okay,
corner.
okay.
It's the apartment building right there.
Apartment building, okay.
I think that would be handy to know. That's it for me.
It doesn't even.
I think that you're missing the fact too that this is a long building. So like if you live on Elm Street, where I live, whoever lives behind me on Jasper, I don't really see those guys at all. So whoever lives on Oak, like those folks, you're not going to see. And Elm Street, you know, you're talking 3 1-bedroom units and a 2-bedroom. Or if you want to do a duplex with 3 bedrooms on each, I mean, then you're getting dense as well. So I guess I'm curious as to what you would want to see on the property.
I have 17 more questions to ask.
Oh, well, we have a babysitter at home, so would you have to leave?
Am I okay?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so continuing from that, again, through the chair, again, it isn't clear, it wasn't clear, I guess now that the land has been severed, but in planning, it wasn't clear as to whether this was a 2 4-unit buildings or 1 8-unit apartment. So I guess we all know that what this actually is an 8-unit apartment building. I mean, this is really an argument of semantics. You can call it what you want. It's an 8-unit apartment building, which again, I would appeal to the committee. That's not allowable in this zone. Moving on from that, through the chair, I would like to ask the planners, what is the road allowance on Elm Street and Oak Street, both for road expansion? The old houses were set several feet. The old house that was on that property was set several feet back from the road. So it's based on the previous footprint of the old home, the front yard on Elm Street was within existing setbacks. If the new development is allowed to be placed closer to the street, will that infringe upon road allowances? The existing houses on the other side of the street are already very close to the sidewalk, as was pointed out in several points in MTM's planning justification. And it would already potentially be an issue for road allowance, but would presumably be grandfathered in since those homes have been there for several decades. Bringing this building on this lot this close to what the previous, this much closer to the street than what the previous building was only makes that concern and potential issue worse. Especially when it's close to a blind curve on Elm Street, which several years ago there was already a fatal collision on that street, a fatal car collision. So if we're concerned about traffic, there's already been a death on that blind curve when there was only a single house on there with like 3 people living in it. So again, my next question is, what is the road allowance for road expansion on both of those streets?
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair. I can't speak exactly to the road allotment. I can tell you that the front yard setback that they're proposing is within zoning. So the proposed building will have a 6-meter front setback. So I can't exactly speak to what the expansion of the road would look like because I don't necessarily deal with that. But in terms of the front yard setback, it'd be 6 meters.
Okay.
From the lot line.
From
From the lot line.
From the lot line, thank you. Again, through the chair to the planners, the servicing brief states that the lot and building will be serviced by existing water and sewer service on Elm Street and that there is, quote, adequate infrastructure for such. The staff report states that there is adequate service. However, that was clearly in relation to the town's water and sewer treatment plants, which I would hope they have adequate service because we're putting several subdivisions on the edge of town and we just spent much money upgrading them. A member of the Public Works, Mr. McMunn, told one of my neighbors, Karen Woods, by email that Elm Street can more than handle the increased capacity based on the most recent flow tests and a camera inspection 3 years ago, that overall it is, I quote, fair to good for its age. Yet those of us who have lived on these streets for several years know that there have already been broken water mains on both halves of Elm Street, both above and below the blind curve. That the blind curve is on Simpson Street, the intersection of Elm and Simpson. And that has resulted in water and sewage both flooding people's basements in the last 2 to 3 years. So since that study was done. So I guess I would ask through the chair to the planner, is the existing water and sewer specifically on Elm Street going to be properly assessed before this is built? We would argue it should be. And if it is, and it needs to be upgraded, who will then pay for that? MTM Construction or the town of Smiths Falls, and by default, the taxpayers?
Mr. Chair, and may I say we're lucky to have Director McMunn here today.
Wonderful. Yeah.
So, yes, thank you, Paul.
Thanks for putting me on the spot.
Yeah, that's why you came.
Yeah. So what I can say is we do have a 12-inch water main on Elm Street that makes its way all the way over from Catherine Street, down Simpson Street, down Elm to Jasper. We have done, we looked at the boundary conditions being hydrants in the vicinity. They're blue hydrants. Those are the best hydrants we can have for fire flow rating and for domestic flow. So water is not an issue. You're right, there has been a water main break, and I always knock on wood because if I don't, we're going to get another water main break. So there was a water main break there a couple of years ago.
January 2022.
Into my basement. That was
Right.
okay.
That can happen anywhere,
just saying.
right?
Yeah.
That can happen anywhere. So it's not a matter of capacity to service the site.
Right, we're not arguing capacity. Our concern is the existing infrastructure as it stands, the very old clay pipes, which based on our assessment, because again, my mother's lived there for over 60 years, haven't been replaced in 60 years. So they're old clay pipes that haven't been replaced in 60 years, and they've already broken twice in the last 2 to 3 years.
The breaks that you mentioned are respective of service laterals, not the mainline sewer.
Okay.
Common, particularly with older homes, the services coming out would be clay pipes as well. That's where people tend to get service backups in their home. Sometimes it's respective of the main, sometimes it's not. In the case of Elm Street, it was service repairs. So typically what we do there, if we have a service break within the municipal right of way, we'll go in and do a repair. Quite often we replace because the pipes are aged, they're 60, 70, 80 years old. We replace those service laterals. We'll replace the sanitary lateral. At the same time, we'll replace the water service as well from the main into property line. For the simple reason that based on the era of homes, much of them are lead services and we want to get the lead out of the ground, obviously. So I did confirm with staff that was the case in the last couple of years with respect to service laterals. We had a water main break, but again, that isn't unique. That's, this development will not tax the system to the point where it's because we have 2 additional 4-unit units. I'm not going to get into whether or not it's apartment or they're two separate things. That isn't going to put strain on the water main system. It simply isn't. Not at a 12-inch main, not where we have flows in excess of 70 psi for water flow and domestic flow. That's great pressure. Anybody that has pressure like that should be happy that they can turn their tap on, their shower, they can run their washing machine. They're not going to be subject to flow conditions coming into the home. I did look at the camera inspection records that we had from a couple of years ago. Yes, the pipes are vitrified clay pipe, common for that era, yes, there were original pipes in the ground.
Sorry, can you tell us what year that would be, please?
How old the pipes
How
are?
old are the pipes?
I didn't look back to the asset management plan, but I would suspect we're probably pushing 80 years old.
And the regular average lifespan of those clay pipes is
They would be at the end of their service life.
50 to 60 years.
Yeah, so they'd be at the end of their service
Right.
life, yes.
So
But
you have to recognize that that's a concern for us.
yeah,
For me, I'm right across the
Yeah.
street.
but just because a theoretical, something you read in a book or on the internet says that vitrified clay pipe would have a service life of 50 to 60 years, doesn't necessarily mean that it hits that mark and then it's got to be replaced.
I
Right?
recognize.
It's based on condition.
Absolutely.
I would gauge the condition of the pipe having reviewed the camera inspection from the upstream manhole to the downstream manhole down at Jasper to be fair to good. Is it perfect? No. If down the road there was ever any isolated issues with the main, we would do just as we always do, go in and excavate and do a spot repair.
What would be considered an isolated?
If we had a partial main collapse, which is going to block flow, we're going to know that very, very quickly. People are going to be calling and say, I see whatever happening, or I got water coming up in my floor drain in my basement. We're going to go and pop manholes and go, yes, this manhole upstream is full, the one downstream is not. And then we would start looking for where we need to do the excavation. And that happens on a regular enough occasion with aged pipe. We're not unique here in Smith Falls. Lots of municipalities struggle with aged linear infrastructure in the ground, and we repair as need be. So like I say, when I reviewed the camera inspection, I would consider it to be fair to good. I've seen worse. That's where I was confident, and I have to be respectful as well of the upstream catchment area as well. It's picking up literally about, I didn't do the exact count of homes, but I'd say it's in and around 25 residential dwellings that tie into that line. It goes about halfway up Catherine Street. So there's a manhole there and it flows down Catherine to Oak, down Oak to Simpson, Simpson to Elm, and then Elm out to Jasper. And it picks up a short little stub up on Oak Street between Catherine and Rockville Street. So very small catchment. So when I looked at it on the camera inspection, it's a video, right? It literally and it's actually an 8-inch pipe. It's not a 10-inch pipe. Based on the camera inspection records, and we haven't went down and measured it, so it could be 10, I'm thinking it's 8. Regardless, it has about, under normal conditions, I don't know, I know the date, I don't recall the time that they did the camera inspection, but they literally had about that much flow through the bottom of the pipe. So I haven't done the full-on math to say what capacity does that pipe have? Could it service 300 homes? The reality is there's about 25 homes, residential properties that tie into it. Capacity is not an issue. Condition of the pipe is always going to be an issue.
Arguably
No different
not
than-
if it was newer, respectfully.
Pardon me?
Respectfully, it wouldn't be if it was a newer pipe. You're saying that on average, it's currently 80 plus years old, and you just said that on average they live 50 to 60 years.
Mhm.
So at that point, it's double its expected life expectancy.
Sure. And that's where I said we wouldn't.
That's like saying a car typically lasts for 10 years. You're driving a 20-year-old car and saying, oh, it can go for another 20. Respectfully, again, I'm like, logic would dictate.
Yeah, but it wouldn't, so if I could through the chair, it wouldn't be good practice for a municipality. We simply couldn't afford it, that if linear infrastructure reaches its theoretical life capacity, that we go and start.
I'm not
ripping up
saying that.
roads
I'm
and
saying we're
things.
talking about, again, through the chair, doubling the number of residents in one building than what is on our entire block than what is on Elm Street, either or. And pipes that are already almost 2 times their expected lifespan.
And likely the oldest infrastructure in that area right now, right?
Right.
Because we have the new infrastructure that went in on Catherine,
Mhm.
and it came down to Simpson. And when you look at, my house is 1890, they estimate, to 1900. It was pre-plumbing,
Right.
right? And I know that because we took out the washcloth. So these are old houses, and this really has nothing to do with this development, other than the fact that it has brought a light to to my concerns.
Right.
of watching these mains flow
And the proposed development again can host
to add
potentially twice the
additional
current people that are on
onto
the
these,
block.
yeah. So
Right, and to your point, Ms. Kerr, can I call you Blair?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, Blair. So if we were looking at a different scenario here, if Matt and Tegan were looking at, densification within an area that, if the Public Works and Utilities Department were at all concerned about capacity of sewer, we would be having the applicant do a full-on hydraulic analysis study of that particular catchment area to see if whether or not their development is going to put that pipe over its capacity. That isn't the case here. Like I said, we got 25 homes, roughly, give or take, a home or two, that connect into that pipe all the way from Catherine Street, a little bit of Oak, down to Simpson to Elm, and then it makes its way there from there down to Rosedale. Rosedale? No, Riverdale, Riverdale. And then it makes its way over to the wastewater plant. So capacity isn't an issue. If it was an issue, then we'd be going back to them and saying, okay, in order for you to develop this site, you would have to upgrade the linear infrastructure because the pipe's too small. That isn't the case here. Condition, in my opinion, at fair to good, it wouldn't be something that we would contemplate regardless of whether or not these folks here are looking at redeveloping that site and adding further densification. The town would not be looking at replacing that sewer and water on that street in the immediate future.
until
I don't know off the top of my head.
Until we have sewage.
Again, through the chair, I would respectfully remind the whole committee, again, what we're talking about, we can hypothetically make several, statements here in relation to pipes, but again, we've just been told that they're currently almost twice past their life expectancy, and we're talking about putting a building on that is potentially more than double the number of residents than the block and or the side of Elm Street collectively. Like, that's what this comes down to, respectfully, again, through the chair.
Jay?
Yeah, I understand that. And you've crunched the numbers, and there's going to be more people on your street. As a councillor, and Director Rickman has told us 100 times, we've got 60-some kilometers of road in town. We've got 100-year-old infrastructure that we're picking away at. Look at George Street, Catherine Street. So I rely on his advice when we talk about capacity for development, right? And he tells us what the priority is because we trust him to tell us what the next street is going to be done. And next street is going to be done is going to be the upper side of George Street because we've done the bottom one. So we pick away at it. So we rely on him for advice, and because he's a professional, I'm not. And so I accept his explanation.
If I could, through the chair, I just want to reiterate, particularly for the Planning Advisory Committee, that there are no concerns with capacity. In my opinion, the added flow of 0.078 liters a second that's going to come from this site, and again, that's a very conservative number. It's a high number there's a lot of factors go into the calculation of determining what the theoretical flow is, and it errs on the side of caution. So is it 0.07? It's less than that. I can tell you unequivocally it is significantly less than that. But we err on the side of caution and we over-design, right? Capacity is not an issue. The fact that there's additional flow is going to have zero impact on the condition rating of that pipe. There isn't a capacity issue now. There wouldn't be a capacity issue if we approved 100 homes to tie into that pipe. So I just wanted to be clear on that. It's a very small upper catchment that flows through there. Is the pipe a perfect condition? No. Is it aged? Yes. Is the condition such that it, if we had any issues with the pipe in the future, just as we would anywhere in town, we would go and repair it. Right? And then the pipe would probably function for another 5-10 years until it comes up on the the capital agenda through budget deliberations for reconstruction.
Through the chair, I'm just going to stand here because I'm facing everyone. I will come back to that again. Presumably this same assessment was also done for Settlers Ridge apartments, and it just so happens that a resident before they were built, and they were probably told the same thing. It just so happens that tonight a resident on Allen Street told my mother, coincidentally before she was leaving work, that since Settlers Ridge was built, their basements have been flooding. And so I don't know the whole state background of that. I do not. This particular resident approached my mother because,
Come up here, so because you're up here.
Again, so this resident on Allen Street approached my mother asking her what was being built behind us, specifically because, again, Settlers Ridge was built. Presumably they were told that sewer and water was not a concern. It was adequate flow, and now their basements are flooding. Again, I do not know the specifics. I do not claim to know the specifics on that. This was mentioned this afternoon, literally 5 minutes before my mother left work. And this resident knows my mother, and they said, be concerned, ask questions. So I will leave it at that in terms of the sewer and water. I would like to move on to my next question. I would like to ask specifically, how will garbage be managed? So dumpsters or individual bins? Again, this is because of an increase in density, an increase in residents. If it's in bins, where would the garbage be stored until garbage day? So I raise this question because it's a spatial issue. It's a health and safety issue. There are no details on the plan or in any of the documents I have reviewed for the holding and disposal of garbage. We have concerns about 8 to 16 garbage bins total now blowing around Oak and Elm Street on garbage day, along with 8+ recycling bins. Further, if Smith Falls ever moves to the self-pickup garbage machines, who knows if that will be in the future, those garbage bins actually have to sit on the already very narrow streets on Oak and Elm Street. We also have concerns if it were a dumpster, and again in garbage in general, because we already have existing rodent issues in this neighborhood due to other neighbors not properly storing and or disposing of garbage. So I would ask through the chair to the planner or MTM Construction, quite frankly, whoever can answer this, how will garbage be managed in this, again, I would argue 8-unit apartment building?
So we're lucky to have weekly pickup here in Smith Falls. So with the garbage is in your unit or in your garbage bin beside your property until it goes out to the road, just like every other property. Simple as that.
Thank you, Ms. Mackey. My next question, again, we have concerns, just to summarize that, we have concerns again about garbage, the number of garbage bins, the number of recycling bins. Again, this unit is 7 times the number of residents which was on that property. My next question through the chair to the town planners, will there be new traffic, speed, and parking reduction measures implemented on Elm and Oak Street? As my neighbor, Reverend Brower, noted, there are young children that play on both streets. An increase of 8 units potentially leads to 18 occupants total, and subsequent increase in traffic leads to traffic concerns and safety concerns on both streets. Cars already go very quickly at both streets at all hours, and especially during the school year with St. Luke's High School nearby. Years ago, again, there was a fatal collision on the blind curve on the corner of Simpson and Elm Street. Currently, you can park on both sides of Elm Street and both sides of Oak Street. Currently, if there's a vehicle parked on both sides across from each other in the same spot on the street, there's not even a full lane of traffic to navigate through this. Further, in winter, there's no overnight parking. So again, through the chair to the town planner, I would ask, will there be new traffic, speed, and parking reduction measures implemented on Elm and Oak Street?
Through you, Mr. Chair, with respect to traffic and parking reductions, from how I understand is that you typically, if there is a study to monitor how much traffic is on the street, it's like complaint driven. So the Department of Public Works would be the one who'd be monitoring that and notifying us. If that was a concern during the review, that would have been brought up.
I'm raising it now respectfully.
I understand.
Yeah.
And so there would be 4 units on each street. So 4 in Elm and 4 in Oak, right? So with respect to the parking, based on what is proposed, each individual unit will have their own parking. So it's not expected that they'll be parking on the street. Not saying that doesn't happen, but that's what it's intended. If that does happen, that's outside of what is being proposed. And with respect to garbage pickup, has already been discussed, it's curb pickup.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Blair. Can I just, on the parking? So my name is Karen Woods, and I am from 19 Elm Street, which is right across the street in the old semi that's falling apart. I just wanted to talk about the parking. And I brought some photos to show you how narrow the road is at the upper. And when I refer to the upper part of Elm, I mean before the blind bend between Brockville and Jasper, okay, for Brockville and Simpson. When you are coming down from Brockville and you're coming towards the blind corner there, and I don't know if that's just a local term that we use that we've coined ourselves, but we are now making it official. It is quite wide. And an emergency vehicle, utility vehicle, hydro trucks can pass quite easily with a car on either side. I don't know if it's appropriate. Can I show you the pictures? Yeah? Okay, I got a couple extra. Don't get ahead of yourselves though. I've written on both of these. So you'll see on the diagram, which is Google Maps, it's very difficult to see, but item A, photo A, is the upper portion. I have two. I might need that back for comments. Okay. Item A is the upper portion, which clearly shows that I can park my car beside someone else's car, and utility vehicles would easily pass through, emergency vehicles, large pumper trucks, yada, yada, right? You go to the blind corner, that is where that road significantly narrows, and it's a weird phenomenon. If you have somebody parked on the left-hand side or the what would be considered the north side of the street, it pushes you just naturally, because you don't want to ding anybody's car, naturally pushes you into oncoming traffic. And that's where the blind corner comes in. But it also reduces 4 feet. So this is the stretch of road right in front of the new development that has me questioning, this road can't sustain this parking how it exists. So I would ask through the committee to consider, I don't know the process for government at this level, to consider making it one-sided parking moving forward with no parking signs year-round on the south side or the same side as theirs. Because the other thing about that is the depressed curbs for access into a new development would again significantly reduce with the available parking that is available on the south side of that property, and make it impossible. And it would push the cars in towards the blind corner and make it absolutely impossible for me to get out of my driveway. Had a situation, you guys were doing the demolition at the old place, and I was kind of boxed in, and I literally had to maneuver out of my driveway and back down Simpson Street to get back onto Elm. So it's a huge concern. So I'm leaving. Thank you.
You should put your paper.
Oh yeah. You guys can keep those because I'm going to talk to those later. Maybe don't mind. Keep going. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. To the chair, so parking concerns, I would argue that, many people, again, simple logic dictates, many people have 2 vehicles, despite, yes, some people have 0 vehicles, as Ms. Mackey previously laid out. Many people have 2 vehicles. Based on bylaw, they need 1 unit or 1 parking spot per unit. They're meeting that, although I have also questions about variances that I think should actually be requested for that as per the current site plan, but I'll get to that in a minute. I would like to point out that, again, if this were being treated as an apartment building, which it actually is, and if this was a rezoning, which, again, I would argue it is what this request should have actually been, this development would actually need a 9th space specifically for visitors, as there's 1 parking space for every 10 units required as per bylaw.
It would actually also require 2 parking spots. Again, if this was being actually treated as an apartment building, which again, I would argue it actually is as per simple logic. Again, I think this is an argument of semantics. As per bylaw, a dwelling consists of 6 or more units, which this would at 8 units. 0.25 bike parking spots are required per unit, which would mean that this building would require 2 bike parking spots. I bring this up because we're already requesting several variances on land use. There's not a lot of land to spare. So moving on to the, I could be wrong here. I'm not an expert. Again, I've spent 20 plus hours reading a lot of material in the last week. So through the chair to the planner, would MTM construction not need to request 2 additional variances to accommodate parking or 3 additional variances? According to the parking lot area location details of the zoning bylaw for an apartment parking, which again, I would argue this actually is, it is allowed in all yards except the required front yard, provided no parking spaces and no driveway shall be located within 2 meters of a habitable room window, both in distance and height, and provided that where a dwelling requires 4 or more parking spaces, which again, this does, such spaces are no closer than 1.5 meters to any lot line. This requires, the above would apply to required parking located on the same lot or an adjacent lot. For all other dwellings, parking is permitted in, quote, all yards except in the required front yard, provided that no parking space and no driveway shall be located within 2 meters of a habitable room window, both in distance and in height. The above shall apply to required parking located on the same lot or an adjacent lot. It's a lot of legalese, essentially. But with the lot's placement as abutting more than one street, combined with the landscape requirements for yards and parking spots, not mean that parking spots cannot be along the front of Elm Street if that's the front yard. Further, if the lot is severed and there's a 0 meter setback for interior side yard, would that not mean that the parking spots in the front and backyard both need to be at least 1.5 meters from the new property line? So would they not have to be moved further from each other? Or a variance requested? And further, based on site plan, would parking spaces on Oak Street not be too close to the building's own windows, as looks like they're right against the building on the site plan? So would that not require either a change in design or additional variances?
For you, Mr. Chair, there's a number of questions. So let's start with the first one and then we'll walk through them.
With the lot's placement as abutting more than one street combined with the landscape requirements for yards and parking spots not mean that parking spots cannot be along the front of Elm Street?
Well, true. But this is along, so the parking, there's no parking in the front yard. So what you're looking at right now is that we're looking at the front yard setback.
Okay.
And then to the side we have the garage and then we have the parking.
Okay.
So there's no parking in the front yard.
How are you entering the garage?
You're entering the garage, well, through the front, but you're not parking on the front. You see what I mean?
Nobody's gonna park in the driveway?
Well, you can park, well, see, there is a garage and then there's parking on the side, so there's no parking in the front. I don't know if you have a question.
Do you have a question? Through the chair, the second question on my list was further if the lot is severed, so I guess as it apparently has now been, and there's a 0 meter setback for interior side yard, would that not mean that parking spaces in the front and backyard would both need to be at least 1.5 meters from that new created property line as per bylaws?
What they're asking for is 0 meter setback through the variance request.
Right, but the new property line is there, and it specifically states in bylaws that parking spaces need to be 1.5 meters from property lines. So would they not need to be 1.5 meters from each other?
From the newly created lot line?
Yes.
Well, if you're looking at the newly created lot line right here, the parking would be in the garage on the interior side.
I'm talking about at the back.
At the back. See what you're saying?
But they're actually too close to the lot line, the newly formed lot line.
No, what 10 feet is in meters.
Pardon?
I'm not sure 10 feet are in meters.
I would have to Google it, I'm sorry.
It's 2 meters, 2+ meters.
Okay, well then that's sufficient.
But to the lot line, so those are that's 5 feet from the lot line.
Okay, Carl.
Just to, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, just to clarify, the The applicants did not ask for a minor variance to accommodate parking provisions. Those certainly do need to be satisfied. So when it comes time to detailed site design, they will either need to comply with zoning and arrange their parking in the location that complies with zoning. That would be verified by Mr. Grant, or come to the committee for further minor variance. But at this point, we don't have a variance application for parking. So we have to assume, we have to assume that they're going to configure their developments in a zoning compliant way.
So through the chair, thank you, Mr. Benke. And through the chair, my last question, again, then that would mean from the spot, just to clarify this, the lot line is there, the spots need to be 1.5 meters from the lot line. The current design, I can't, in my
It's hard
head,
to see, sorry.
That's okay. Meters to feet, do that conversion, but it looks like they would need either the spaces would have to be moved, or there would need to be another variance request, I believe. The third question is, further based on the site plan, the parking spaces on Oak Street look like they're too close to the building's windows as per bylaws. So again, they would need to be no more than 2 meters of a habitable room window. And based on this design, they are. So again, would that not require additional variances and or a change in design?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I did confirm with the design architect, the drawer, that the proposed parking is actually sufficiently away from the habitable window. I know that it's not shown here because you don't see the windows in the elevation, but it is. That has been checked.
Can I add to the parking? Yeah? Okay. I'm not technical, guys, so I need to read. Sorry. Okay. And I need my glasses. All right, so my additional concerns with the parking, is it appropriate to address it now? And my name is Karen Woods, and I mentioned that at 19 Elm. All right, perfect. I have a little memory issue too. Okay, so my additional concerns with the parking are related to the character of the unit design. The developer speaks to the 4 units facing Elm as having a garage, charming front entries with a gable roof that, in their opinion, fits in nicely with the current streetscape while allowing for parking. However, I believe it is important to note that this interpretation of fitting does not, in actuality, present a full picture of the streetscape. The front of this proposed development of the units facing Elm is, in my opinion, completely dedicated to parking. And contrary to the planning rationale document in review of minor variances, it will stand out as different, because the developer said it will not stand out as different, and for the following reasons. The fact is that all existing homes on the street, from the upper to the lower part of Elm, and surrounding area, including the larger apartment building adjacent to the property on Cars Avenue, only have side yard parking lots and drive lanes. In addition, all homes have exterior front porches of varying sizes with small lawns or gardens facing the road. Any garages, car shelters, or sheds are set back closer to or in towards the backyards of these existing home units, giving a nice, walkable, it's a quaint area. I know it can be a bit of a slum, and I'm being honest. I live in the neighborhood, but it is a quaint little area, and this particular design with these front garages right in our faces is not in matching with what's going on in the character of the community. And all of the homes in the neighborhood have good-sized backyards, of which many mature trees and gardens that aid in cooling and provide gathering places for neighbors and friends during the summer months. So my question, is it appropriate? Can I ask my question now? Is, in your plan, I don't really see green space. I don't see meeting areas. I don't see a place to outside barbecue. I don't see any of that. And I'm also concerned, I work for Children's Services. I'm also concerned about the well-being of any child that might live there. Where are they to play? You want to just come up and join me and we'll just go back and forth?
I've got a nice picture on too.
Okay.
Okay, so this is sort of the side we're proposing. So each side, like the 1-bedroom has a side entry. So there'll be nice green space with sort of a fence for privacy to the back where that fronts onto Oak. So this, they'll have a nice walkway and they can set up their patio, and it would be a great little spot for them as well. I've just been loving Pinterest and finding great photos to, that's half the fun is planning. So,
because that is a huge concern.
and I think given the age of the homes on the property, you don't see garages, but if somebody were to develop on that property, just people do build garages now for residential homes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something that you probably would see even if it wasn't us building. It might be someone else building something with a garage.
Yeah, but is there a responsibility in keeping with the character of the neighborhood? I don't know.
Absolutely.
Can you?
There is a responsibility.
There is.
in keeping with the neighborhood. So that's why we want it to look pleasant, like it's residential, it's 2-story. There's we want to plant trees, and we've worked with Carl and the town before at our property on Maple Avenue, and we stick with the tree plan.
Can I just interject through the chair? Sorry. Just, I really appreciate the comments about green space, and this committee always looks at that, trees and how things look in the neighborhood. However, that comes, and Richard or Carl can confirm this, that comes at the site plan stage of an application, and all those discussions are going to be had. And, I appreciate you and everybody else bringing that up, because that's going to be top of mind.
Okay.
Yeah,
we really don't
point.
know the process, right? You have 3 days to figure this out. And so we're
I'm
trying
not saying
to
you're not right to bring it up now. I'm just saying that's when that's going to come up.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
Richard, am I correct there?
So with new provincial changes, technically, buildings with 10 units or less do not go through the site plan control process. Not to say that won't be considered during the building permit stage, but we can't exactly require certain things because it's not going through the typical site plan control process. But it would be definitely a consideration and a recommendation during the building permit process.
And is that something where we would come back to? Do we come back? No, we're not. We're excluded.
We would welcome any of your, help or opinions on landscaping while we're doing that. We want to make friends with the neighbors. We want it to be, something that you feel good about too.
Through the chair, respectfully, we were not, none of the neighbors were. So MTM noted that they talked to Terry Barker, who owns the house. It's a rental unit. He rents it out to one person. MTM didn't really try to engage any of the other neighbors, and in fact, when they did, his words to my mother was that he didn't like her attitude because she asked questions. So
no, that's not how it went.
That's not at all how it
We
went.
didn't demo when you wanted us to demo, and you said you told
no
us
demolition permit was posted. No demolition permit was posted. And you told Mr. Mackey told
I went out of my
through
way
the
to try to be nice to the neighbors and tell you that we were doing something.
Through the chair.
And you came at me that morning.
Through the chair, Mr. Mackey came to my house on August 15th. He told me that demolition would happen some point in the fall. I asked for more specific dates. He said he didn't know. The next week things were down. No demolition permit was ever posted.
You should. Don't let them go in like that.
It was a courtesy. We didn't need to tell you anything.
But now you're saying you want to work with the neighbors.
I was courteous.
We do want to work with the neighbors, but we're just in the early planning stages. So if this is approved, then of course we're going to be on site all the time. Our kids will be around, as I've seen your daughter playing on the site, and we're around all the time at all of our builds. And that's partly why we bought this property, because it's close to us. We're very local. We don't want to be building, not where we live.
May I say something, or am I just not here?
I can sit.
Yeah.
Do you want to
No,
come
I'd
up?
just like to stand up and say something.
I think you have to come up.
Okay, yeah, sure. To the chair and everybody else here, everybody pretty well knows me in town. I'm a local, worked 50 years retail in Smiths Falls. My name is Sandra Kerr. I'm 66 years old, and I live at 32 Jasper Avenue. My father, Albert Blair, built the home in 1947, so we've been there 77 years. I do not want an 8-unit apartment building in my backyard. If it was one fourplex,
that met everything without all these excuses, that would be something different for me, or a home, but not an apartment building. I already have enough low-income housing people around me, believe me. It's awful. And for the following reasons, as my daughter Blair has done a ton of work, and the other neighbors too, for the reasons that the lot is simply too small for the proposed building. There you have traffic issues, as we've discussed. We have sewer issues, as we've discussed. There's no guarantee that sewer is not going to break down. I understand that. But when Jasper Avenue was done, they put a light down my sewer, and they said it was fine. And when they dug it up, there was toilet paper and everything underneath Jasper Avenue. So I don't buy that. I believe you, sir. I really do. But I'm just saying. So there's garbage issues, and we already have a lot of issues in our neighborhood, unfortunately, from low-income housing and that with garbage. It's sad, but it's true. Privacy issues for the people on Simpson Street. That, sir, is going to be right at your patio, right on your deck. I saw your wife or your daughter last night barbecuing outside when I walked up the street, and I thought, soon they're going to be right there. And there's going to be that much space between his deck and that unit. And that's not nice. You pay high taxes. You have a right to privacy. Noise issues. And who is going to come forth when all these problems start occurring in our area? I can tell you right now, and I'll look at the councillors, it's not going to be bylaws, because we don't have enough bylaw officers in our town. Nobody wants the job. And why would they? So, laws are made for a reason. And according to our Honorable Sean Pankall, last year when we had issues with a property on Jasper Avenue next to me, he said that laws are to be followed. Well, there are laws here that are not being followed. And Mr. Mackey and Mrs. Mackey, this is not a personal attack on you. I'm worried. I'm really worried. And I'm emotional. Because I've lived there my whole life. And now I've got low-income housing here, and I'm going to have it in my backyard. And I'm not happy about it, and the neighbors aren't happy about it. And you can make promises, but you can only do so much when you're a property owner. And when you get them in, believe you me, that you can't get them out. And that is the truth. And I know that. So that's all I got to say. I wish for once this town would follow some bylaws and would enforce some bylaws and actually do the right thing. And no, I'm not opposed to you building on the property, but build something that is suitable for the property that you have bought. Not 8 unit with 16, 17 people living there. And that's all I have to say, and thank you very much for giving me the time.
Mary, you had something you wanted to?
I do, mostly comments though right now. As I respect where the neighbors are coming from, and I want you to understand that these decisions aren't taken lightly. And frankly, with the legislative changes that have taken place at the province, now that this consent and severance is in place, up to 6 units could be constructed on this property with additional residential units. So it could be a semi-detached dwelling with 2 additional residential units on the property, regardless of rezoning or variance process or not. So what we're really looking at here is essentially increasing it by 2 units because of legislative changes that have kind of come down to the pipeline, and our hands are, like the municipality's hands are tied in that regard. We have to comply with the provincial rules and regulations. Anyways, to go on to additional comments, I want to say that just on a more positive note that I'm actually supportive of this development. I think we missed an opportunity to review the density on Carse Avenue and on Oak Street, as well as down the street on Elm, where there's similar R4 apartment buildings. Yes, understanding that R4 zone is closer in density to this. However, I think planning staff have demonstrated that the 4 tests that the province prescribes us to determine whether or not a minor variance is appropriate they've demonstrated that those 4 tests are generally met. I think traffic is generally well managed. You have frontage on 2 streets, several parking spaces, 1 per unit. Also keeping in mind that each parking space is well set back off the street, and if you're getting at least 4 driveways into that property, then there's at least areas for 4 additional visitor parking spots. I do think that it's a relatively good fit, just based on the size and the scale and the way that it's going to fit in on that property. It's a rather large property, perceivably, obviously, because we did do the consent application. I do think that there's reasons to support this. And I'm willing to support and trust staff to move forward, based on the fact that I think it's difficult. There's just a lot more information at hand than I understand your concerns. There's just a lot more, I guess, to it than that. And I'm of the opinion that if I brought in my neighborhood comparison, that this can be a very good fit for that area if the technical requirements are met through the construction process. So I'm supportive of the application.
Yes.
Through the chair, thank you, Mary, for your opinion. I have several more questions at this point. I do kind of wonder, truthfully, I think I would, it seems to me that the request to build, or the plan to build 4 units per building in 2 buildings on this lot, I would argue is likely monetary driven. I would argue that the reason garages are being included is because that allows a smaller request for exterior side yard variance. Again, I've read all the bylaws, as opposed to if there were no garages included. That's probably also a monetary decision, in my humble opinion. I find it fascinating that Mrs. Mackey earlier stated, again and again, that the reason for this design is because there's a shortage of senior housing and they don't need to climb stairs and on and on. Yet this is a 2-story building and the upstairs units are all accessed through stairs. So presumably only the bottom 4 units would be ground level access. The upstairs 4 would be stair access, because that's how you get upstairs, and there's no elevator involved. So I would like to raise to the committee that I don't totally, for lack of a better term, buy that reasoning that part of this design is because of a desire to increase senior housing that is ground level, when half the 2 buildings, or half the what's really a 1 building, is not ground level access. I would like to know when the detailed design plans will be provided, but it sounds like that isn't really a community driven effort, because we do have concerns about odor, noise, contaminants, privacy, given what we feel is already being substantial variances being requested. I would like to know if substantial.
Sorry.
That's okay. It's okay. I would like to know if fencing will be constructed along neighboring property lines. So, for example, our property line, my neighbor Jessica's property line, my neighbor Bob's property line, and Terry Barker's property line. I would like to know that, and I would like to know how noise and et cetera would be limited. Again, we're talking about potentially 18 residents being housed in this building. So through the chair, I would invite MTM and or the town planner or whoever can answer this question to outline when the detailed plans will be available and what kind of roughly what the design plans are and how they're going to ensure that
neighbors don't lose privacy, because again, more than anyone, I feel for Bob and Leslie, because their property, it's a weird shaped property line. Bob and Leslie's property is a weird shaped property line, but they are going to have no privacy whatsoever. And they've lived there for more than 20 years, I think.
Yes.
More than 20 years. So I really feel for Bob and Leslie. I really feel for Jessica. She's lived there for what, close to 10 years now? I feel for them. So I'd love to know from MTM, through the chair, from MTM, what the kind of rough design is and how they're going to ensure that, you know, their neighbors are going to have some semblance of privacy on the properties that they've owned for several decades.
I guess I would say, you're saying monetary, but you're right. I don't think it would be wise for us to build something that, A, we couldn't tenant, because then us as a husband and wife, small business, we would really suffer.
Respectfully, that's not my problem.
No, but I'm answering your question.
Okay, yeah, no.
So you're right. There's 4 one-bedroom units at the bottom. And when I say affordable, I don't mean low income. It's not what that kind of delineates, or what you're saying is maybe what you're experiencing in some other areas. I understand that. If I'm managing and owning these properties, I don't want the mess and the hassle and the problems. I don't want that. This is our livelihood. It's what we do. And I guess my point was that with Samir and Lapine buildings going up, there's already a lot of one-bedroom apartments that maybe are starting at $2,400. But we have a lot of people who are calling us, aunts, uncles, relatives of your own, that are saying, my budget's around $1,700. I'm on CPP, old age pension, I just don't have it. So we would be silly to try to construct apartments that are just going to compete with Samir or Lapine at this point, because there's obviously an influx of those.
So respectfully, through the chair, how are you going to ensure that we don't lose privacy, Bob doesn't lose privacy, Leslie doesn't lose privacy, Jessica and her family don't lose privacy? Because the variance is, there was one single family home on that property with 3 people living in it.
It was a pretty, yeah, I mean, to be frank, it was a pretty cushy situation for a little while there.
For several
a lot
decades.
Of blocks are way more dense than what you guys have experienced for a long time, and I don't want to. I guess we're the ones coming in to make the change, and so yes, it will be a little more dense, but like Mary has said, without any approvals required, we could have simply built, without even having to come and ask, 2 single-family homes, or we could have got the consent to sever 2 single-family homes with 2 ARUs, additional residential units, which are allowable now in Ontario. So those you could say triplexes, like you're saying this is an 8-unit building. Well, essentially those are 2 triplexes. So what we're just asking is for 1 more unit on each side. And again, they're 1 bedrooms. They're not family units. So I think it'll be, I expect it'll be not as, like I said, we could have just built that without permission, the ARUs.
And we would like our tenants to have privacy as well. So it's going to be nice for everybody to be able to plant cedars or something down the property lines and create privacy for everybody. We're going to be, our tenants are going to be happier.
Through the chair, will there be fences on our property, Bob's property, and Jessica's property? On the 2 side yards, will there be fences through the chair?
There may be a cedar hedge, there may be a fence, we haven't decided yet.
No, you don't see much. We haven't worked out those.
Jay?
So, someone else has a comment. I was going to say pretty soon, I think the committee should have an opportunity to discuss and make a decision.
I would like to express my shared desire that this is going to be a wonderful home for your tenants and also for us. And so I would like to take you up on your offer to, you said you like the landscaping, so you make it a beautiful home for everybody. So I would like to participate in that, and just want to make it the best it can be given the situation we're in. So.
Let's do it.
You
Yeah,
Steve?
thanks, Mr. Chair. I've got a couple of comments here. I understand everybody's concerns and everything, but you also have to understand, I'm kind of new to the process. I've only been doing it a couple of years. But there are so many steps involved in this. We had to sever the lot to entertain the idea of what they're proposing. And we can entertain the variances, but until we actually see the site plan and there's a meeting on the site, on the development of the site plan, we can't really address a lot of the things that you are so concerned about. And it's a process and it can be lengthy, but I think with everything that's been presented tonight, it falls in line with the town's operational official plan. It, in my opinion, supports council's desire to intensify residential housing, and it falls in line with provincial guidelines. So I'm going to make a recommendation that we accept staff's recommendation for tonight.
Go on.
There's only one question I have of whether it's Richard or it's the proponents. The previous house, where it's at, how far away on the western side was it away from the property line?
On the western side?
Over there.
Let me I'm trying to visualize here.
Yeah, there. It's the, in my view, it's the right hand.
It's not a great picture.
It doesn't even look like it. I have photos.
It was very close on that side. Very close.
On which side? On Oak side? On Oak side, no, it was about, he had a.
On the western
motor
side, we're saying.
Yeah, the western, closer to Simpson, I guess
Yeah,
it is.
it's very close on the western side.
Is your proposal to, sorry, through the chair, is the proposal to come a little bit further in then?
Yes.
If I may, I also agree with my chair, my committee member. It is in keeping with what the province is pushing municipalities to do. And I do agree that the size of those units, potentially rental, purchase, whatever it's going to end up being, will be in a market where the lower income people will be able to afford to live. Right now, it's almost impossible, younger people or older people, to get something affordable. So I would support this as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and this is one of the longer planning meetings I've been at, so it's been, and that's been for a number of years. But I always appreciate when people come in and we've heard from Blair and for a number of weeks now about this, and I know that staff, both Richard and Carl, have been more than accommodating and receptive to your questions, and yeah, and so I'm going to support this as well. And I'll just point to the four tests that we always go by. The official plan part, the zoning bylaw relief, that is it desirable, is it appropriate, and minimal impact. I think staff have done a lot of work to demonstrate that to us. And I'll also say that we've worked with the proponent before with applications in the area, and there's one particular I can think of that the neighborhood had similar concerns, a smaller neighborhood, and the feedback afterwards was nothing but positive. So I have every confidence that the proponent here is, and I've heard it tonight, is willing to work and make sure that the neighborhood is enhanced. So I'm going to support staff's recommendation.
Thank you. To the chair, Mr. Brennan, I completely, Councillor Brennan,
Yeah.
sorry, I completely hear you. Again, Mr. Grant, you've been phenomenal. I don't want to discredit that whatsoever. I do kind of question, you've said you've worked before with these applicants, and there was a similar neighborhood upset or concern. do you know, like, this is just a genuine question. Do you know roughly like how long the people that were concerned have lived in that neighborhood?
It's an old neighborhood.
It's an older neighborhood. And were they mostly property owners?
Yep.
Taxpayers?
Yep.
And okay, so
I I don't want to argue about it. I'm
no,
just saying my
I'm not trying to argue
experience,
about it.
So, well,
I'm
I
asking
don't-
through the chair. I'm asking genuine questions because again, I knew walking into this, quite frankly, it was probably a losing battle.
I'm not lying, okay?
I believe you. I fully believe you, Councillor Brennan. I honestly do. I can't state enough the fact that right now, I'll be quite honest, how we feel as a neighborhood is completely bulldozed over. We feel like, I guess the province doesn't really care about landowners that have been on their land for decades. I guess the town doesn't really care about landowners that have been on their land for decades. And I get you guys have your mandates from the province. I understand that. I really, really do. I just can't, I guess at this point it doesn't matter because the plan is to pass it through. But I just can't be clear enough that, again, logic dictates, like, this is an 8-unit apartment building with 18 people potentially, and which isn't allowed in this zone. It's being, in my feelings, pushed through. And I'll be quite clear, like, my mom and my neighbors don't agree with it. We're feeling shoved out of our own neighborhood. And my guess is that's probably how other neighbors in similar situations have felt. We are feeling shoved out of our own neighborhood when, again, my family's lived there for over 70 years. Karen has lived in her house for 5 years now? 3 years. Jessica for almost 10. Bob for over 20. The Browers are new to the neighborhood, but they're lovely people. And so, I guess it doesn't matter at this point because it's being pushed through. But I just would really appeal to this committee that, and honestly to MTM Construction, I'd appeal to you to think about the fact that you're coming into a neighborhood where people have lived here for several decades. It's family land, and this is extremely, extremely upsetting, and it's also extremely disappointed. I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed in this process. I'm disappointed in this building. I'm disappointed in this town, and I don't know how else to say that. And I guess I'm not supposed to be emotional. I'm not usually an emotional person, but I want that to be on record, that this is very much how it feels, that if you're a longstanding resident in your property and a developer comes in, it doesn't really matter. So thank you for your time.
We're a local developer. On that note, a local developer, you could get somebody.
I'm just curious if any of my colleagues here would be interested, and I am concerned with the property on Simpson and just the privacy aspect to it, as well as on Elm. It does look a little bit potentially close to the property line. Are we willing to entertain any conditioning with respect to landscaping, fencing, or screening for those interior side lot lines?
Okay.
I think that that's site plan control, right? And that comes through this committee.
Well,
correct?
so I believe Planner One earlier stated that this is exempt from site plan control due to provincial rules.
Carl.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the staff recommendation includes a condition that certain low impact development techniques be implemented through a grading and drainage plan that would be implemented and confirmed through a development agreement where the owner agrees to do and ensure that these are kept. So that the committee, if the committee wishes, you could augment that development agreement to include a specific condition along the lines of what Ms. Remick was suggesting.
Sure. Yeah.
I'd like to, can I ask one more thing, please?
Yes.
Yeah, I know. It's a question that's really, Mr. Chair and everybody else. Okay, Matt, you do your landscaping and everything, and I end up getting flooded basement from it. What are you going to do then?
There's a site control drainage plan. There's a.
No, I'm not fighting with you. I'm
That's
just asking.
satisfied. Make sure that doesn't happen.
If it does,
Well, what do I do then?
It's not going to happen.
but if it does, we're like.
I'm a
this is
single
this is
senior
very
lady.
valid
There was
question.
more hardscape. There was more hardscape on that lot than there's going to be once we develop it.
Well, it's all rock. Rock will decide where the water
There
is
was
flowing.
more roof area from the house and the barn than there's going to be once it's developed. More asphalt, right? More sidewalks. There's going to be less. water issues are gonna
So I'm
be
not
better
going to
than they
be
were
flooded.
before.
If we are flooded, what happens? Who's going to pay for that cleanup? Because we've never been flooded before.
I'm a senior woman, 66, whose husband's in a nursing home, and I'm by myself, other than my daughter helps me and lives with me and helps me with stuff. I don't have the financial means to be doing all this, and my insurance would probably say, well, you know, it's too bad.
Well, we followed what the engineer had told us. So
If that happens, I can sue you then, right? Or what? Mr. Mackey's not answering me, and I'm not fighting with you.
I'm not interested in fighting with you anymore.
No, I'm not fighting with you. I'm just
Okay.
asking.
John, yes.
Okay.
No.
Can I make just one more comment? Is it possible?
John?
It's really dumb. This is not my comment, but this is dumb.
You're good. You get
I
to
work
be on
for
TV.
community and social services, so I want you to know that the NIMBY does not apply to my thinking, okay?
Sorry?
Not in my backyard, which we started off with a statement along those lines earlier. But I will tell you that Elm Street can rock. It has more renters than it does owners. Now we are being pushed out as owners, because no matter how much we try to improve our properties, we are battling the rental market, right? And we are also battling low income and vulnerable populations. And what we are seeing on Elm is an increase in violence, an increase in police presence in our community, and an increase in requests for bylaw services, for garbage disposal. And my biggest thing is now sitting in my backyard, which I absolutely adore, and I feed the neighborhood. I have a garden. So I make sure that I'm helping out, especially the house down on Jasper. But the police presence and the level of noise that's coming down from these large units that are supposed to be 4-metered, this past summer in a 4-metered location on Jasper, had in excess of 15 people living in it. Now, I know that you're saying that you are going to take care and choose your tenants wisely, but when push comes to shove and you have a mortgage to pay, I'm not sure that I want to trust you. But, you know, it's a concern. And I think Jasper is a really good example of an absent landlord who is just collecting rents and they're not caring. I also have that beside me in the semi beside me where people are fighting over shared property. They share a backyard. Don't do it. Yes.
Sorry, could you please repeat your name for the minutes?
Oh, yeah. Karen, I get to do it a third time. Karen Woods. 19 Elm Street. These are the angst. This is the angst that I'm feeling. I can't speak for everybody, but it is definitely a fear in terms of, I know what vulnerable populations are. I know their struggles. I help them at work. I do my best. But the living wage in Leeds Grenville and in Lanark is $20.60. People are earning a minimum of $17.20 on minimum wage.
I'm one of them.
And so we don't have a big pot to draw from in terms of people, pensioners, fixed income, right? Unless they have investments. So your dream to have a nice place for my mom to go to is an awesome thought. I don't really want to cross the street. However, that pool is small. And so if this doesn't work for you and you sell the building, we're back to square one. That's all I have to say. I thank the committee for your time. I appreciate this process. It was a difficult one for the newbies in the group. So your staff was amazing. We really appreciate that. And kind of feel heard, not quite.
John?
Yes, Dave.
Okay, I think it's time to move a motion, which I'll move to accept.
Do I have a seconder? All in favor? Carried. Thank you for attending and participating in the planning process of the application MV 24-04 and B 2402. Anyone required further notice regarding these applications is asked to leave their full name and mailing or email address in the sign-in sheet located at the door. Appeal rights, as prescribed by the Planning Act, will be outlined on the notice of decision. If you have any questions of these applications or the process, I invite you to get in touch with our Planner 1 or Planning Clerk. This concludes the planning meeting portion of the Planning Advisory Committee meeting. We will now move to the next item on our agenda. Okay, priority issues.
Would you?
Project updates. Nothing. Next meeting. Committee meeting October 10th, 2024. Don't go away, we have assignments. I have a motion for adjournment. Stephen.
You're gonna have to learn to raise your hand a lot faster.
I wondered if Francine, she didn't.
Thank you.
For the adjournment.
Yeah.
Did you forget?